This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook. Today is December 2nd, 2024. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
I'm Jamie Morris, and I was at Hofstra Radio from fall 2003 to spring 2007.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your stories. What shows and programs did you do at the station?
Oh gosh, I did a little bit of everything. I did a bunch of the music shows to start, Jazz Cafe, Airwave, Rock and Roll Oasis. And then I also started doing the morning show, Hofstra's Morning Wake Up Call. And what else did I do? And then I did a ton of news as well. I was news director, assistant news director. So there was a lot of news lines in my day.
Mm-hmm. I bet. Did you ever work on any of the weekend shows or community volunteer
I
shows?
did. Yeah, I did. I board opted for Eileen Cronin. That
Mm-hmm.
was fun.
She's a trip. She's a lot of fun. What did you have any other titles or positions other than news director?
I was station manager my senior year. So that was the progression. I went from assistant news director to station manager.
Okay, very good. When you were on the air, did you have any nicknames or on-air personas?
No, I wasn't that fun. No, just Jamie.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'd like to go back to the beginning with everyone and get a sense of what the station was like and what was going on in your mind when you showed up. So it's a two-part question.
Mhm.
What first brought you to the radio station? And then when you got there, what was it like? What did it look like? Do you remember meeting people? What did it smell like? What was going on when you first showed up?
I always wanted to do radio, so I
Mm,
was looking at schools with radio programs. Hofstra, quite honestly, was sort of on the bottom of my list. It was off my radar. And that is one thing I will say is they do such a much better job now than they did back then of like getting the word out because I really didn't know much about it at the time. I applied because we kind of like my family knew people who had went and liked it. I was really doing my parents a favor, if I'm being honest. They were
mhm.
like, "You got accepted. Just go look at it. You never know." I'm like, "Fine, fine, fine." So I was a very bratty, disgruntled 17-year-old. Like, "Fine, mom. We'll go look at Hofstra." Clearly, that attitude changed. Um, recently you and I were both at the Hofstra Radio Hall of Fame induction
Mhm.
ceremony.
It's a great day.
And we had such a good time. And oh gosh, I wish I could remember who it was. One of the inductees in their speech had said that when you walk into WRHU for the first time, there's just a feeling. And I think it was Shannon Ferry actually who said it.
Mhm.
And she nailed it because there just is, and you kind of can't explain it. But there was just a buzz when you walked into the rotunda and, you saw Studio South. And that was like the closest thing to a radio station, because, well, it is one that I had
Mhm.
seen. I went and visited Newhouse. I went and visited Ithaca and like these schools that have these amazing broadcast programs. I never saw a studio in any of those tours.
Really?
Like they had like that big reputation, but it was always like, well, that's off limits to you. The
Mhm.
students don't get to play in there. So you saw the studio, and of course, I think anybody who went to school at the time that I did will probably have the same thing to say of, I met Ed.
Mhm.
And, he just draws you in. I'll never forget being in the rotunda. There was like some people milling about. I thought the studio looked so cool. Everybody was so excited and so friendly. There were current students who were there who just wanted to talk to you and wanted to know what you were interested in. Like they wanted you to be in the club with them. They wanted you there.
Mhm.
And I will always remember Ed Ingles coming up to me and shaking my hand, and he looked at me and he just said, "Look around," in that Ed Ingles booming voice. He goes, "Tell us your story. Use everything, but then use your voice and tell us your story." And just like that Ed iconic way. And I'm standing there, I knew of Ed Ingles. My dad was like so
Mhm.
excited to meet Ed Ingles because my
Mhm.
dad always listened to him. I mean, it sucks you right in.
Well, yeah, what a story. I'm ready to sign up. Like,
Right?
how do I get to be part of that? That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how you felt. You were like, well, it was 0 questions. Like, as soon as we left, I was like, "Okay, mom. Hofstra was pretty great. We'll do Hofstra."
So were you a Long Island kid? Were you local? Is that why you were doing a favor to your parents?
No, I actually grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
So it wasn't still not terribly far, just a little over an hour away. But my parents were from Brooklyn, so they had a lot of friends move out to Long Island. So a lot of their kids had gone to Hofstra, and like they're the only ones that wound up in Jersey. I don't know how it happened. So they just knew a lot of people and heard good things about it. I had gotten accepted and just kind of like tossed the acceptance letter to the side because I had already had a couple of acceptance letters from other schools that I knew more about. I knew people that were there personally, and I wasn't really giving it a chance, but I'm very glad. Mama knows best.
Mhm.
And hopefully my kids now know that. We'll get them there.
At least you've got an example story to say, see, mom knew, grandma knew, so now I'm
Mhm.
telling you that I know. Um, you mentioned going to other campuses and not seeing a studio or not seeing the equipment. In your mind, did you have an idea of what a radio station would look like? And I guess to go back further, if I could add this question on now, you said you were always interested in radio. Where did that interest come from?
I always listened to radio growing up. When my parents were driving around in the car, they always had talk radio on. And then as I got a little older, I was listening to Z100 and Elvis and like all those guys. I just always really was attracted to it. And this is actually a really random story. When I was a kid, I was part of a New Jersey like statewide spelling bee
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I'm that nerd. And it was broadcast on a local New Jersey radio station, and that was my first time really on the radio. I was a kid. I think I was in 5th grade. And I thought it was the coolest thing I ever had seen.
I
And
don't think there are two cooler things in the world than a spelling bee and radio. I think
oh, did I
I think you
find this
peaked
people?
early there. I don't know.
I swear I had friends.
On the spelling bee team, of course. No, I'm just teasing. I'm
Obviously.
teasing. No, it's awesome.
Obviously. We came in 4th. It was a team effort. But I just always remembered that. So radio, it was always radio for me. It was never TV, it was never communications, it was always radio. So I had that narrowed down. And most of the other schools that I looked at, like Syracuse, were like, oh, you have to apply to Syracuse and do their, ridiculous a million page long admissions essays when you had to write them out. Remember
Hmm.
those? Um, you got there and you know like I said, when you walked into the Hofstra radio station, it's like they wanted you there. All these other schools, it was a very like, well, you can't sit with us. It was very like, well, do you have what it takes to be with us? And that's not for underclassmen. Only seniors are allowed on the air. You don't get to touch that.
Hmm.
It was very exclusive and not an inclusive experience. It wasn't as welcoming. It was very like, well, you'll be lucky if by the time you're a senior you have your own show. Where at Hofstra it was like, yeah, we'll let you on as a freshman if you get into the class, like go for it. So it was a huge difference in recruiting.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a different culture. And I want to go back to something you were saying before, sort of about an energy or a vibe at the station. And clearly some of us hear it and are attracted and we go, okay, this is my new home. Thank you. And then some people sort of will breeze through and not get through. And I wonder, is there something in your mind about Hofstra Radio that has this magnet that pulls in people, or is it that some of us are looking for this, whether we know it or not, and we're drawn to that? Does that make sense? Like what attracts and what makes certain people stick and not others?
I always sort of asked myself, maybe because I was so personally passionate about the path of a radio career,
Hmm.
because there was over, I guess there's probably over 100 kids, when I was a part of the station. It's a lot of people. And you
Hmm.
had there was like somebody like me who was instantly involved and wanted to get their hands dirty and wanted to learn everything and know everything and did multiple shifts because, again, cool girl here. Um, and then there were the people who did the minimum amount, did their one show every other week, or never wanted to be on the air, or just needed some sort of extracurricular to do. Everybody chose to be as involved as they wanted to be. And I guess it was a flexible enough environment where you felt comfortable doing it however you wanted to, if that makes sense. But
Hmm.
like for me, as somebody who was so passionate about it, I'm like, you have the opportunity to do all this stuff on the radio. How do you not want to do more? But
Right. And
not everybody's as cool as me, Brian.
right, right. We've established that. um, I guess I'm wondering, is it something that maybe comes from the students passing it down, like the older students, or is it Bruce and Ed and John and those guys saying, hey, this is the environment we're creating, and you're welcome to it if you want to, or is it some combination of all of it?
It's definitely a combination. I think it was great that there were so many current students who were so encouraging, like the, executive board members at the time are, super friendly and always wanted to plan hangouts and like make sure you felt like you were a part of it.
Hmm.
And in the meantime, Bruce and Ed and later on John would be there to kind of I guess let you know that you can do this. Like this
Hmm.
is truly a path that you can take, and we'll give you the tools you need in order to have this radio career if you'll take them. They were very encouraging and just great mentors to have. And there was nothing that you couldn't do in their eyes.
Hmm.
They really let you learn as much as you wanted to learn. And the camaraderie we had as students, and making friends and having get-togethers and gatherings, it just all kind of smooths itself out. Like you do, like you said earlier, like you just feel like you're a part of something right away.
Yeah. Well, thank you for indulging me in that. I love hearing the different interpretations on what makes it work. And no matter how many of these I do, it's always fun to hear that. So, but let's get back to that beginning. You get into the station and Ed Ingles gives you this welcome and you're like, sign me up, let's go. And they sign you up for the training class. What do you remember about the training class?
I remember thinking it was really big.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was one of like the first classes in college that I took. So it was like a lot of my classes were smaller at the time. So it was like my first lecture hall class that I had. So I was like very impressed.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is real. Like we have to take this seriously. I remember Bruce's "I Like to Sleep" Nights speech, which
Yeah.
apparently was phased out over the years, which is a little disappointing to hear.
Really? Oh, wow. That is disappointing because I've heard so many people tell it, but okay, but it left a mark on you. You got that. What
I
else?
definitely, yeah, definitely got that. He hit it out of the park with that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just remember being really excited. I remember like it was the only class that you looked forward to, and more so looked forward to just getting in the studio. I was really always very anxious. Like, okay, cool, lecture, great. Let's get in the studio. Now what can you do? Let's get the engineering clearance. Let's get the announcer clearance. I was ready to go.
Do you remember any particular skills or tips or tricks that you learned in the training class?
Well, I learned everything about running the board and engineering wise in that
Right.
class. That obviously we were still doing. They probably don't do it anymore, but we were still learning how to set up the vinyls
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the DAT machines and the cart machines. So we had to learn all of that, and it's definitely it was new old technology for me.
Got it.
But yeah, that was really where you learned all your engineering stuff. And again, it was really a group effort. You had it was really the students teaching the students, which was, it was fun. It was like you were just hanging out with your friends.
Nice, nice. Do you remember anybody else who taught those classes or any of the other new recruits that you were in the class with?
Oh my gosh. Oh, let me see. Well, Andrew Falzone was the station manager.
Hmm.
So he was like the main teacher, if you will, of the class, teacher, professor. He
Hmm.
led the class for the most part. Oh my gosh, who was in my class? This is really bad. Oh, we're getting old, Brian.
Hmm.
I remember so many people. I just don't remember who was like in my actual class. Isn't that terrible?
Well, maybe it'll come back over time as we're talking about stuff. But
Yeah.
um, so you're all fired up, you're ready to go, and you're taking this class, and you want to get on the air. And I guess there's a test that you take at the end that gives you
Mhm.
clearance to be a board operator and on the air. Do you remember, other than the spelling bee, do you remember your first time getting on the air at WRHU?
I think spelling bee. I'm gonna kick myself for that one. Um, I think I did an airwave shift. I think that was the first time I was ever on the air. It was a 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, which I say that out loud now and I'm like, oh my God, that is way past my bedtime.
Right.
Like, I can't believe I did that. And then I would walk home at night by myself. Why did they let me do that? Okay. But I'm such a mother now. Like, I would never let my child walk home at 11 o'clock at night. Um, yeah, it was airwave. But I remember like AOL Instant Messenger was still like a big thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I remember being on AIM in the studio and like I had everybody IMing me requests and like wishing me good luck. And I had it up on my little status, the link to listen online at wr2.org. It was a big deal.
That's a lot of fun. Were you excited? Were you nervous? What were your feelings?
Oh my God, I was so nervous. Like the whole world was listening, obviously. I
Right.
was so nervous. It was fun, once you get it out of the way.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big deal, and especially in that case, through instant messenger that people are listening and commenting, and you break the mic open, and you're suddenly connected. So that's really exciting, and you're getting that immediate feedback, both I guess through phone calls and through messages. That's pretty exciting. Once you got on the air, and you said you were doing some of the music shows, the jazz show and airwave and things like that, was there a moment where you thought, okay, I've got this, I know what I'm doing, or was it gradual? How did you know you were good on the air?
You know, I think it was gradual, but I think the show, honestly, that made me think I'm good at this was when I started doing Newsline.
Hmm.
Newsline was at the time it was very involved, and actually, I think it's a half an hour long now, or at least it was by the time I left. When we started, I think it was only like 15 minutes.
Right.
And then we had gradually extended the time of it. But I would sit with Ed most of the time and we would prepare the stories and prepare the rest of everybody in the newsroom and get the cuts. And, I think when it got to the point where I was running the board, producing the show, anchoring the show, when you're doing all of that at once, I was kind of like, huh, I didn't mess that up. And I was doing a lot. And yeah, I think Newsline is probably where I kind of fell into a really good rhythm of like, I know what I'm doing and I feel good enough and more confident enough to help other people. Sometimes that you don't want to overstep and try to give advice if you think you don't know what you're talking about yourself. So that was really the first time that I felt like, oh, I can bring new people into Newsline and I can show them how to do this.
Right. And so I guess news wasn't necessarily your main interest. Were you more interested initially in doing a music show, or were you open to everything and anything?
I was open to a little bit of everything, but the one thing I will say that's funny about my time at Hofstra was I really didn't think I wanted to do news very much.
Hmm.
And then after, I wouldn't say I was dragged into it, but it's kind of like, why not just try it? Just do it. So that's what I did. And I really had a knack for news. I was good at it. So I sort of fell into it. And after doing Newsline and being assistant news director and being news director, I had an internship at WCBS 880. All right,
Hmm.
it is so sad.
Yeah.
That was my first big internship, and it was actually when the Republican National Convention was at Madison Square Garden that year,
Hmm.
and I got
Hmm.
to go, and they let me come and help them with the coverage. Um, it was just the coolest, most extreme experience ever. And aside from that, I was riding around in cars with the reporters and like going on all the beat stories and everything and running all over the place. And the news director at WCBS actually sat me down at the end of the internship and he said, "What is, the biggest thing you feel like you've learned here?" And I said to him, "I think it's that I don't want to do this."
Hmm.
And he laughed and he said, "That's great. Better you find out now than going into this whole career because it's not an easy one." So, news just happened to be something that came very naturally to me, but it just wasn't really I didn't love it. I didn't love doing it. So, that's eventually, I think, how I got into Hofstra Morning Wake Up Call and wound up doing the morning show. Which I don't know, I think people hear morning show like I did when I was 20 years old and was like, "Oh, I could never do that," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But I was like, "Well, maybe that is where I should maybe focus." And it's sort of worked out. Um,
A little
it
bit. Yeah.
didn't really expect that, as a freshman going into it, but then coming out, it was like, "Oh, okay."
So were you a freshman or sophomore during the time of the convention?
I was it was the summer going into my it was either into my sophomore or into my junior.
Yeah, because that would have been
Yeah.
summer 2004. So I'm just
Okay.
trying to think of you. You're getting your feet, and you said you're getting used to Newsline, and you're good at it, and you're good at news, and putting the show together, and then covering a convention is an entirely different machine. It's a
It
whole
was
nother thing,
Yeah.
and you're kind of running around, and it's high pressure, and I can see definitely not loving that.
That was actually really cool because they didn't give me so much responsibility because I was just the intern,
Right.
but they wanted me to have the experience, which I thought was really cool of them to give me that press pass they really wanted me just to watch,
Yeah.
just observe, which it was just very cool to be, in the room, like very Hamilton, right?
Right.
And that actually was fun, very intense, but fun. It was more like the running around and talking to the reporters and like seeing how they handled filing reports. And I remember listening to one of the reporters about how much her physical health suffered
Yeah.
from doing that job, because it's very, very physically demanding. And yeah, I don't know, something about it. Doing I did it the whole summer. It had to be my summer going into my sophomore year, so I was still pretty young. Um, and yeah, it just wasn't for me. I thought
But that's such a mature decision and realization to make at that point and go, instead of just wanting to impress this person from WCBS and go, "Oh, I loved it. I want to do all this," because you want the opportunity. You had the sense to go, "Yeah, that was awesome, but that's not something I want to do all the time." And I'm wondering how you took that information and brought it back to what you were doing at WRHU.
So, the news director that I had talked to at CBS, had said, "Well, what is it that you do want to do?" And I said, "I guess, since I'm good at news, I am good at it, but maybe just some of the lighter stuff like entertainment." And that's where we started talking about, "Oh, why don't you look into doing some entertainment reporting?" And that's what I started bringing into Newsline. Newsline eventually did start doing entertainment reports. So I started doing that there. I also started doing entertainment for Hofstra TV at the time for their newscast. And then like I said, I eventually transitioned into doing the morning show, which at the time, the morning show was a pretty loose show.
Hmm.
We definitely were not as organized as they are now. It was basically just, okay, who's going to wake up at 5 with me and schlep to the station and who's getting Starbucks. And all right, let's go talk about some nonsense. We weren't like super it was way more unscripted, it
Got
was
it.
the opposite of Newsline, and it was fun. So I kind of found my niche there.
So what time? I guess two questions about timing. What time at night was Newsline on? I think a lot of people said about 6 o'clock. And then what time did you start the morning show? Was that at 7 or earlier?
Um, I know Newsline for me was always at 4.
Okay.
Yeah, Newsline was always 4 to 4:15, and then they expanded 4 to 4:30, I believe.
Okay.
I might be, but it's somewhere in the 4 range, between 4 and 5 for sure.
That makes sense.
The morning show, did the morning show start at 5 or 6? I want to say it was around there because when I first got to the station, we still weren't 24 hours.
Hmm.
Oh, had to power on the station if you did the morning show.
Yeah.
And I believe that was at 5.
Okay.
I'm going to say it was probably 5. Yeah.
So my follow-up question to that is, how early are you getting into the station to prep, or was it just we're lighting this thing at 4:59 and we'll see what happens?
That's still what I do today. That's it. We're holding on to a latte and a prayer. we just go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. It's a leap of faith every day. We're gonna make this thing work. That's
It
awesome.
was fine. We had fun.
Good. Good. Who else were you doing the morning show with?
It switched around a lot. I want to say I might be lying. I might be completely making this up. I want to say I did some with Andrew Sikora,
Hmm.
which is funny because we now he's on BLI on Long Island and I'm on KJoy and we're both still on in the morning.
Yeah.
It's too bad we can't work together. That'd be fun. I want to say Alina Florescu
Hmm.
was there at some point. Amanda Sheffer, I remember because she worked at Starbucks and got us into Starbucks early before it opened. That angel.
Nice.
That was a nice little perk. So thank you, Amanda. I do still remember our pre-opening Starbucks runs.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good group and a lot of fun, getting up there early. I want to go back a little bit to sort of your early days, and um, when did you feel comfortable socially at the station? Did you feel like you were instantly welcomed, or did it take some time to find your group?
I definitely felt instantly welcomed, but that was in a general sense. There was nothing that was like, well, that person doesn't like me. There
Right.
was nothing like that. Everybody got along. Rainbows and butterflies, obviously. Uh, but I really found my people, I think, by my sophomore year. Like I really kind of dug into like a solid group of friends. Like I became very close with Alicia Battinelli. She's still my best friend to this day. We hung out a lot. There was a big group of us. Andrew Falzone, who was the station manager at the time, was always trying to like organize a bunch of outings. Oh my gosh. If I name so many people, then I'm gonna get in trouble if I forget somebody.
Yeah, Bruce Avery always told me that. He said, "Don't start naming people because you'll forget and you'll get in trouble." But sometimes it's nice to go through that list of people and bring back those memories. But
I know. Don't make me get out my Facebook because then I'll really have you for hours.
okay. And speaking of Bruce, in those early days, I know that for a time period, a lot of people said that Bruce was real tough in the beginning, that he was kind of laying down the law and saying this is what it is, and we're holding you to professional standards. And I think as time went on, he kind of softened that edge. What were your initial impressions of Bruce?
So, your first impression of Bruce really is from your interview.
Hmm.
And they really treated the interview like a professional. Like, I went in dressed up like it was a job interview, and that's how they treated it. Yeah, Bruce always gave a more serious vibe because then the next time you really saw him was the I Like to Sleep Night's first training class speech.
Hmm.
Um, but he was a big softy. He didn't fool me. He did his speech, and I believe that the reason why he did the I Like to Sleep Night speech was to make sure that people understand what they were signing up for. That if you're not going to be, as passionate about it, there are people in this room that are going to take this really seriously. And if you're not along for the ride, then we got to weed you out.
Yeah.
I think I feel like that was probably part of the purpose of the speech, that, this is, treat this like your job, and we'll get you one. you know?
Yeah.
So I took him seriously, but he also, I think, he always had that smirk. He always had
Hmm.
that elbow jab kind of demeanor of like, he'd say something really serious, but then give you like that raise of the eyebrows.
Yep.
He was still your friend, but somebody had to be dad.
Yeah, yeah, I think that initial, like you said, we have a high standard here, and we're handing you the keys to the Starship Enterprise. But he wanted to let you know that he was on your side, and that's
Yeah.
a great way of telling that story. I appreciate that. So you find your group, you find that you love news, but you like the morning show even better. Are you still doing music shows at this point, or is it just the morning thing?
I started, honestly, once I got older, it really started to transition to whatever fit into my schedule.
Yeah,
So I didn't have a choice by the end then to do, like Eileen's show. Like, not that I didn't love doing Eileen's show. I did miss doing a music show of my own, but during the week, things were just so crazy and hectic, for an overachiever like myself that, loaded up the coursework and,
hmm,
did all the extracurriculars. I wound up just doing a lot of the engineered shows, or doing like an engineer, like classics show, like
right.
just to do that minimum shift. But, by the time I was news director and everything, I was doing so much extra work anyway. So, yeah, the music shows I was able to squeeze in. I think I did Rock and Roll Oasis my last semester, when I finally like wasn't station manager anymore,
Right.
and my course load was lighter because I was about to graduate. I did Rock and Roll Oasis. And actually, yeah, I did, because I that was my last time on the air, was the Rock and Roll Oasis show, because I closed out with Bruce. I played Springsteen because I was
Nice.
I was the Jersey girl, so that's how I left it.
Thunder Road.
I did play Thunder Road. Yes, I
Nice.
did.
Nice. Fantastic. I love it. I love it. So I think you kind of answered this earlier, but I like to ask at this point. Um, when you first show up on campus, obviously you meet Ed Ingles and you're like, I'm ready to sign up. But when you're first starting that training class and getting acclimated, at that point in time, what did you think Hofstra Radio would mean to you, and what did it become?
So going into college, I remember I had told myself I was very insistent on being open to a bunch of different activities. I was, again, making so many friends. I was a huge band geek in high school. I was in choir. I was in theater. So my goal, honestly, was to be a part of the radio station for sure. And I knew I wanted to major in radio. So that was a priority. But I originally started out minoring in theater. So I wanted to do theater. I wanted to do plays. I wanted to do music. I wanted to be in the symphony orchestra. I wanted to do it all. And then, as it turned out, minoring in theater lasted for one semester.
Hmm.
um, because, I didn't really vibe with a lot of the people in the program. The orchestra had a 3-year waiting list when I was a freshman, if you were not a music major or minor, which I was not. So that kind of fell by the wayside. And as it turned out, all of my energy just went into radio at that point.
Hmm. And it seemed, I guess it seemed like the right thing. I mean, that's a lot of ambitions, that's a lot of things, but it seemed like the stars aligned and it said this is where you need to be.
It really did. Yeah, it was very clear that, like, this is what I wanted to focus on anyway. I'm like, why am I going to waste time trying to mess with everything else and stretch myself too thin? Like, I want to do a good job here, so I need to be here. So I was all in.
Hmm. Hmm. Fantastic. Jamie, this has been so much fun getting to hear about how you got started at Hofstra Radio. And I'm hopeful that you have some more stories about being news director and station manager, and we can do this again sometime. That would be fun.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we were finally able to do it. I've been listening to a bunch of them and hearing a bunch of my old schoolmates and such. So happy to do it. Thanks for doing it.